Hey everybody, Mr. Grove here. Today we're going to talk about some local Bond County birds. And so it's kind of standard when you're describing birds, you're going to look at kind of their legs and their beaks. So do they have kind of a perching leg? Do they have a beak for seeds, a beak for predators? Do they have legs for wading or swimming? The other thing is kind of size. And so we would kind of look at and describe, is a bird a robin size, or is it a crow size, or is it a sparrow size? Because those are three common birds that pretty much everybody knows. So we'll start off with the kind of perching birds and songbirds that are common in our area. And so one that we're familiar with here, because many of you were Blue Jays in junior high, is the blue jay. The blue jay numbers actually are a little bit on the increase recently. West Nile really knocked them down back in kind of the 90s. And so it's good to see these guys kind of bouncing back a little bit. So these are going to be common in kind of woodland areas. These are oftentimes the alert people of the woods. So when you walk in, they will be the ones that kind of, let everybody else know that you're there. Robins are also very common in our area. And so these are kind of ground birds. So you won't find them at a feeder really. Somewhat migratory. They used to be kind of considered the harbingers of spring, kind of springtime has arrived, but pretty much nowadays are mostly year round. Another one that we're very familiar with in this area, our beloved St. Louis Cardinals, is the cardinal. And so this is a good feeder bird, a real heavy beak for crushing seeds. And you can kind of see that difference between the beak on the cardinal and the beak on the robin because of that, ability to kind of crush seeds. Another one is the rose-breasted grosbeak. So again, we've got a really big beak. So gross as in big, not as in ugly or anything. And then you can see where the rose-breasted comes from. So we have a lot of these at our feeder. Not as many of these, but they are in the area. Another one that we have, another wooded bird, is the black-capped chickadee. And so this is one that will kind of come to a lot of feeders in the winter as well. A common, what we would kind of consider a blackbird but it's technically the common grackle. And so, or sometimes it's called the bronze grackle because of this kind of iridescent head that it's got. So, very pretty based on when the sun shines on it, it will kind of turn colors a little bit. Then on number 7, we have the common house wren. So that will be a common feeder bird as well. Number 8, we've got the goldfinch. So goldfinches, again, a common feeder bird. And these are both sparrow size. Our chickadee would be sparrow size. These would all kind of be robin size, we would probably say. The blue jay would be a little bit bigger, so starting to push crow size, but not quite that big. The only hummingbird we have in our area is the ruby-throated hummingbird. So the males have this bright ruby throat. They are a perching bird. They will perch if they get a chance, but that long, slender beak, you can tell, is good for used for nectar. So they'll try and get the nectar out of flowers and at your hummingbird feeder. Our waxwing, you can see how it gets its name is the tip of the wing. Looks like it has just a little tiny bit of maybe like a candle wax on it. Our red-winged blackbird. So this is definitely a kind of an open field bird. So you're not going to see those in a wooded area as much. But if you get like an open field or along the side of the ditches of roads where the weeds are a little taller, that would be where you'd see these guys. We'll skip to this guy in the middle. This is the nuthatch. And so he is, again, also a feeder bird, so kind of more sparrow-sized. And then number 14, 14 and the actual sparrow that we had on the previous page, so the house sparrow. These are the two invasive birds, okay? Really all birds are protected by Illinois law, so you can't just, shoot them or kill them in any way, with the exception of kind of the house sparrow and the starling. The starling looks very similar to like a grackle, but you can tell the difference. They have the yellow beak as opposed to the black beak. The spots are more juvenile, so those spots will go away as the bird gets older. But the starling is a perfect example of what not to do when it comes to invasive species, because legend has it that all the starlings in the United States started from basically about 12 birds that were brought over from Europe. And they just took off, and now starlings are a major nuisance bird all throughout. And then we have two blue-colored birds. This is not a blue bird. This is the indigo bunting. So all completely blue is the indigo bunting, and those are common open wood birds. So if you have like not a real thick, dense wood, but more of an open wood, you would see them. Very small, sparrow size. And slightly bigger, but still in between sparrow and robin size, would be this guy, and this is the eastern bluebird. We're very familiar with them in Bond County because we have a lot of bluebird houses as pushed by a local Bond County resident. So you can tell the bluebird then is blue with the orange breast then. So those are some of our perching birds, our local birds of prey. So the biggest regular resident in Bond County would be the red-tailed hawk, and so you can see, the reddish tail there. But typically we don't see that part of it because they're flying or it's away from us. So how you can identify them is they have these kind of stripes along the breast, and so that's the red-tailed hawk. All hawks are endangered or on the protected list for Illinois. I don't know that we would necessarily consider them endangered because as you drive down the road, you'll see a red-tailed hawk about every mile, it seems like, but they are protected. Some of the other kind of raptors, this is a common one that we would see, and these are Cooper's hawks. Okay, so definitely considerably smaller. So these would be pushing crow size, maybe just a slight bit bigger than crows, but very sharp talons. And so these guys are all predators, and they'll go after anything from other birds up to, we've had them kill chickens before. So those are the hawks. Another one that's not technically in the hawk family, but actually is in the falcon family, is the American kestrel. And so you'll see these guys along the side of the road on power poles, very common, quite a bit smaller than a red-tailed hawk. And you can kind of note them based on these little lamb chop sideburn kind of markings that they have by their face. For the nighttime, we've got 4 common owls that we would see. So the biggest of those is the great horned owl, and it's got these little tuft of feathers here. And 2 of the more common ones are the barn owl and the barred owl. And so you can see the barred owl has these stripes on its breast, a little bit more speckled face. And then the barn owl is more whitish on the face. And then the smallest of the owls is the screech owl. And this is a good example to show that there are different color phases in birds. So it's kind of like races, and they can intermingle as far as mating goes without any kind of genetic or social preference. So, but the screech owl is very, very small, just literally less than a pound usually. And so pretty seclusive. You probably wouldn't see these guys much. You might hear them, but you probably would never see them. One of our local migratory birds of prey would be the eagles. So we do have eagles out on Governor Bond Lake. There's usually 1 or 2 eagles that winter out on the lake, and so that's exciting to see those making a little bit of a comeback as well. So those are our local birds of prey. Our woodpeckers, okay, range anywhere from very small up to the largest is the pileated woodpecker. So this would be definitely crow size. These are the really loud. And woodpeckers all have this long chiseled beak that they can get in. They have kind of a special design on their head for their bones, so that allows them to hammer on the wood and not injure their head. And then they actually have a long tongue then that can, once they've pecked a hole, that tongue can kind of shoot in the hole, and that would allow them to get the insects out of that. So common woodpeckers that we have would be the red-bellied woodpecker and the red-headed woodpecker. It's very confusing because they actually both have red heads, but as you can see, red-headed is completely kind of more of a scarlet red. The red-bellied has kind of a brighter red and just kind of the cap. And if you do get a chance to look at the belly, it's a little bit reddish tint, so very faint to be called a red-bellied woodpecker. But these could both be feeder birds. This one's going to be more of a kind of a grassy prairie type bird, and this would be more of like an open wooded bird as well. Two that look very similar, and so it's important to do size comparison on those, is the downy woodpecker and the hairy woodpecker. And so they both are black and white. The hairy woodpecker, though, has a lot bigger beak compared to its head size. So the downy woodpecker's beak is going to be very small compared to its head size. And so that's definitely a way you can tell those apart. And then our last one in the woodpecker family is the yellow-bellied sapsucker. And so these would kind of go for thin type trees. When we were doing our maple syrup tapping this winter, we noticed one of the ways we started identifying good sap trees was looking for holes. So there'd be a series of holes just kind of all horizontal, and that would be where these sapsucker birds have drilled in trying to get the sugary sap then. And so if it was good for them, then we figured it was good for us, and so we'd tap those trees and get some sap. So those are the woodpeckers. Our local game birds, so that we have. So we have mourning doves are very common, and so dove season's in the fall. The bobwhite quail, you've probably heard that call before. And so that's a ground bird. They will fly, but they'll kind of stay in coveys. Also a hunting bird in the fall. And then the ring-necked pheasant. So sadly, these guys are not as common as what they used to be, but they are still in Bond County. Two that are very rare in Bond County is the woodcock and the snipe. And so you can kind of tell them from their long, skinny beaks. But they are also local, but definitely more rare and harder to see and find, as the myth of snipe hunting then is actually somewhat true. The one that's very common is the turkey. This was, remember, Ben Franklin wanted that to be our national bird, and very common in Bond County. So turkey season's in the spring. And then our waterfowl type birds. So we've got our two geese that migrate through, and then the Canada geese often kind of just stay, depending on their migratory patterns. And then our snow geese. And then some local ducks would be our wood duck. So here's the pair, the mallards, and then the pintail, because they got these really kind of pointy tails. And you can notice the ducks give us a good example of the male is usually more flamboyant in its color scheme than the female. The female is more for protection and camouflage for the nest, whereas the male needs to attract a mate. So they've got to really dress up their feathers. And then finally, just kind of some miscellaneous birds that we would have also in Bond County. So the killdeer, these are going to be ones that are kind of walking along the road, in open fields, very common in driveways, so that they will nest on the ground. Over the Blue Jay baseball field, we used to have killdeer kind of in the parking lot areas. So they do actually kind of interesting little wounded animal fake dance to try and draw predators away from their nests. So if you see that, then that means you're probably pretty close to their nest. Turkey vulture is one that's very common around. So you'll see them flying in the winter, or in all throughout. But they oftentimes will sun themselves in the morning, try and just hold their wings wide open, kind of get some energy, solar energy on those black feathers. We have our local buzzard bay that's full of turkey vultures up at the marina, but it's a little misleading. They are not true buzzards, so the name turkey vulture is more accurate. If you notice, head-wise, they don't really have much feathers on their head, because they're going to be sticking their head in dead animals, and so having feathers would just be kind of in the way. But what they do have, this giant olfactory spot that will allow them to sense smell, and so they can have very strong sense of smell that would allow them to pick up again on the dead animals. Another common water bird that we'd see maybe out at the lake would be the common loon. So these are going to be a diving bird. Another one that we see all over, especially as you head down to Carlisle, is one of our main gull, and that's the ring-billed gull. And you can see where it gets its name from that ring on its bill. A migratory bird that we have out at the lake every winter is the pelican. So they will group up and flock up, and they only stay through the winter. But there are quite a few pelicans in Mon County. And then a couple of other water birds. This one is the belted kingfisher. So you can see it's got this kind of belt across, and it's a fishing bird. So that spear-like beak will spear the fish, and they will you'll see them perching along trees. They're kind of overhanging the water. Sometimes they do the hover with their wings and then dive down and try and get them a fish. And then our wading fishermen, the great blue heron is common. You'll see them flying. They've got their neck kind of crouched back, kind of like what you'd envision a reptile, pterodactyl of the old dinosaur days. And then when they're fishing, they will just stand motionless with these long legs just kind of blending in with the reeds, and then try and spear with that long beak a fish or a frog. That would be their way of preying on predatory animals. So those are some more miscellaneous birds. And so I hope that this was helpful and that you can start to recognize some of the local birds that you have in your home backyard. So don't forget to smash that like button.